Okay, a few things before I get into the meat of this video. One, you'll notice that I've strategically edited out all of my losses. This isn't because I didn't lose, but because you really have to see what this looks like when ahead to truly appreciate how turtles work. You'll also notice that probably halfway through the video, if not earlier, my build changes from a strength refined Estoc to a more dex focused sharp Estoc. Also, as a side note, I love playing turtles. I can't really describe why, but it's always been a build and a playstyle I liked, and I don't mind dragging a fight into the 5 or 10 minute mark to make it work most of the time. A lot of people have bitched and moaned about turtles in Dark Souls 1 ever since the Estoc turtle became popular, and you'll see that in this game as well, but that's not really what I'm here to talk about. The main focus of this video is about risk versus reward, and how it affects gameplay, and how it's different between Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 3, at least in terms of Estoc turtles. To start with, to turtle is to play very defensively, utilizing quick mid to long range weapons to facilitate a passive spacing oriented playstyle, where you trade off potential reward in the form of high damage for very low risk playstyle, and needless to say, it isn't looked upon very fondly. In Dark Souls 1, the Estoc turtle did very minimal damage by hiding behind a shield and poking you down until they had chipped you to death. The fatal flaw of the Estoc turtle build was that even though it was ungodly when it was ahead, falling behind was very difficult to come back from. This was because there was no way to deal a large chunk of damage without getting a lucky backstab, and you couldn't just lower your shield and poke or you would open yourself up, leading to an unfavorable situation due to the way that poise worked. In this way, the risk of the player was very low, however the reward was also low, and required spacing, timing, and massive amounts of patience to be seen in full, and it took many, many hits to end a fight. For these reasons, after a burst in popularity, the Estoc turtle was quickly phased out in favor of more fun or more effective build choices, though there were a few diehards who kept the build to the very end. In Dark Souls 3, however, the playstyle is very different. In this game, if you trade hits while poking from behind a shield, you still take damage, though it's slightly reduced, so shield poking is less effective overall. However, with dead angles and ghost hits being a thing of the past, you can get away with shielding pretty much whenever you aren't attacking. In this game, instead of poking from behind the shield, more often than not you'll want to use the standard R1 or R1 combo, as it does more damage and has better priority due to its range and speed. The risk of the Estoc in this game is very slightly higher than in Dark Souls 1, however the reward is completely disproportionate. Due to poise being near non-existent, you can get away with much more poking than you could before, and the Estoc does great damage, often taking out a third of someone's health with 2 R1s. The amazing range of the weapon also makes spacing very easy, and since it has priority over most weapons due to its speed, the freedom allowed by this weapon is nearly unmatched. This creates a very frustrating situation for the enemy player, as playing aggressively will be punished, and playing defensively will just turn the game into a wait fest if the Estoc player is patient enough. Against faster weapons, you can just wait out the R1s behind your shield for the most part, and if your stamina ever gets too low, you can just double roll away, which is very hard to catch even with weapons with good roll catching attacks. Other than that, just space pokes, and because of your speed advantage in most cases, you'll win, and against another Estoc user, all you need to do is be more patient or the better player, and you don't really have any unfavorable matchups that I've seen so far. There are certain weapon arts and kicks that will damage your stamina heavily, but it's rarely a risk as avoiding punishment isn't very difficult. As for the unique poise granting weapon art of the mace and some other weapons, it's easy to bait and can be punished if predicted. But if you're never playing aggressively, this weapon art won't really be able to do anything to you, and FP is limited, so your opponent will run out of tries eventually. Shield breaking weapon arts from longswords also have limited use, and won't do much on their own, so you're mostly safe especially if you keep your distance. Heavy weapons are probably both the easiest and the most punishing to play against. Generally, strafing around and going for a backstab after a second swing will net you a decent lead, which is enough for a turtle to win a fight more often than not. And if the player you're against is conditioned to only swing once, then knowing this you can punish with an Estoc swing or two for free. Most players won't really make it this far though, as anyone without a vested interest in beating you will become impatient and sloppy, essentially ending the fight. So why is it important to talk about all this? Well, for one thing, this is a despised playstyle by the large majority of the community, and most players will dislike you for playing it. The fact that this build is low risk with medium-high reward means that it has a good chance of beating a player mentally before actually beating them in game, and a lot of players will give up on fights just because of the playstyle. I think that though this is a legitimate way to play, it's definitely very unfun for the opponent, and as a result, wouldn't suggest doing it unless you really are just playing to win and don't care how other people feel. It's also difficult to keep up the mindset to want to keep playing the build, as it's tedious and boring to most, but To be honest, I've always loved playing turtles, so for the foreseeable future, this is what I'll be running in PvP. I'm not sure if it needs to be nerfed or if it has a reliable enough counterplay to not warrant it being toned down, but what I see for now is an imbalance in the risk-reward of the playstyle. From succeeded in changing the way turtles have to play by nerfing shield pokes, but the adjusted playstyle is at least as good, and in my opinion even better, because you're not limited to doing pathetic chip damage. As for the fact that the Estoc can be used aggressively in this game rather than being pigeonholed into 90% defense, makes it good as a weapon even in normal play. I imagine due to public outcry, either Estoc will be nerfed or Poise will be reintroduced in order to make this build less effective, but I don't see the latter really breaking the build at all. Anyway, that's pretty much all I had to say. I'm going to leave a few more clips in at the end just so you can see a little bit more gameplay from it, but I'd like to hear what you have to say, so tell me. And hopefully in the future I'll be getting a PS4 so I can have a little bit better footage on my... Oh shit, got the